KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting Mivos Quartet, performing the complete string quartets by Steve Reich, May 29 at UC San Diego. Tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
Welcome in San Diego, it's Jade Hindmon. On today's show, where our community begins to heal after the Islamic Center of San Diego attack. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. It's been a little over a week since tragedy unfolded at the Islamic Center of San Diego when two teenagers fatally shot three people. The shock and mourning to follow is felt across the country today. And we're joined now by two Muslim community leaders who talk about how they're processing last week's events and where healing begins. Khalid Alexander is president of Pillars of the Community and a professor at San Diego City College. Also with us is Ramla Saheed. She is the executive director of the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, also known as PANA. Khalid, Ramla, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming in. First, how are you both doing?
I think we're moving. I think, when you don't, no one wakes up expecting to experience a tragedy like this so close to home. So I think we are doing how any community member would do, which is trying to hold those who need holding and trying to provide support where we can and be positive and show that our kids deserve dignity and beauty and childhood in this moment.
What do you see as the biggest threat to that, Khalid?
Since the shootings, there's been a lot of coverage in the media about the horror, about the hatred behind the incident. My biggest concern is that very few of these conversations are bothering to dig into the roots of what led to what happened. So it's easy to, disregard or to speak, it's easy to embrace the victims of this incident, but it's much more difficult to understand where the hatred, maybe more importantly, the pride that these two teenagers who committed the atrocity felt in attempting to take the lives of children and men and women in the mosque. And so I think the biggest threat to us is the failure to actually get to the roots of these causes and just to cover the incidents themselves.
Yeah, it's hard to get to solutions if you can't identify what the problem is and call it for what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have actually seen, people, though, really come together this past week amid the grief and the pain. I'm thinking of last Friday's memorial where thousands of people prayed for the victims. How has the community been processing the past week?
I think the community has known and has lived with this fear for multiple decades. I mean, Muslims in this country haven't exactly been welcomed. And though Muslims are inherently American, they are treated with suspicion. And we have an entire government that is funding law enforcement specifically to target this community through surveillance programs, through programs that frame them as inherently suspect. And in 2005, we had a slew of legislation that came out of Congress that was with bipartisan support. And one of them, that I will never forget the name included, something Foreign Enemies Act. And so it sends a really chilling message to our children and our kids who are growing up in this country, as that they are inherently an American and they will forever be treated as inherently suspect. And I think when you grow up with a frame like that, it's not surprising then, a government that treats you that way would then produce children who cause such harm, right? And let's be clear, the violence we experience, the terror we experience, came from white nationalists, right? Though they don't identify with any specific subgroup, we know that they were, very much connected to a white network of white supremacist ideology, groups. And their weapons had anti-Muslim sentiment on it. And so this is the real threat. And our kids see the absurdity in what the government is doing, and they see the double standards of like how white extremists are treated in this country and not named as the terrorists that they are.
Mm-hmm. And, Khalid, I want to come back to what you said about the roots of this atrocity and talk about the very real, very present threat of white supremacy, racism, and hatred in all forms. I mean, what does this tragedy reveal to us about the consequences of that hate and intolerance in our communities beyond just San Diego?
Yeah, well, I think in order to understand what happened last Monday, you have to understand American history. And I think the community is split into two kind of major groups. One is understanding that what happened on Monday is actually, unfortunately, something that makes them American. The tragedy that happened at the Islamic Center of San Diego is the same tragedy created by the same background. That's the tragedy of the bombings in Alabama, the church bombings in Alabama. It comes from the same place that enslaved, Africans and brought them here for free labor. It's the same kind of tradition of the genocide of the indigenous folks. And unfortunately, it's something that we continue to live with today. And I think you have others who look at the tragedy and they who don't have an understanding of American history, who don't understanding of the history of Black liberation and struggle in this country. And they feel that this is a time to double down on begging people to accept our humanity, to recognize Muslims as human beings. And while that's an understandable feeling, I think what we can learn from the Black liberatory tradition is that no rights in this country are just given to somebody because of a supposed humanity. It's something that we all have to work together for and that we all have to strive for, not only for our own humanity, but for the humanity of others.
All of that, too, leads me to this question. To you all's knowledge, is this being investigated as a domestic terrorist event?
The only, and Khalid can correct me here, the only thing I've heard that this is being investigated as is a hate crime because of the location in which, that was attacked. We have not heard that the FBI is looking into this as a terror attack, but we, in fact, do know that they were inspired by historical manifestations of Nazism and other forms of racist and racial supremacist violence. And so it should be, by all accounts, it should be.
Khalid, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have any information that this is being investigated in any way, shape, or form. Whatever kind of information has came from the police or the FBI has been extremely limited and very frustrating. There are a lot of questions that haven't been answered that begin with the timeline of the mother finding out that her son was on a suicidal mission, to when police were notified and why it was that the schools and the places of worship in the area weren't notified. So unfortunately, the communication around what types of investigations are happening is extremely limited. And so, I don't know how to answer that question, unfortunately.
Khalid, I know that you considered the three victims friends of yours, especially Amin Abdullah, the security guard. What can you tell us about the person he was and your friendship with him?
Oof. Yeah, I've known Amin since 1995. He became Muslim maybe 2 years before I did. I became Muslim in 1995, and we grew up essentially in the same mosque together. Mosques in urban areas often become a place of refuge for people who need help or are trying to kind of like figure out their way in life. And this mosque in East San Diego was kind of a home for the two of us. It's something that I think I'm still processing. He also would come and he prayed with us in the morning at our mosque in Southeast San Diego. He was a proud resident of Southeast San Diego. He used to pray with us in the morning, open up the doors at 5 o'clock, and in the evening at 9, he would show up, open up the doors, and lock up afterwards. So it's a huge loss, not only to me, but to the entire community. Anybody that knew Amin felt that they had a direct relationship with him just because of how loving and open he was to everybody he came into contact with.
Something that I don't think we've heard enough about is just how deeply rooted in faith and spirituality he was, and it was so important to all three men. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, all three of them really represented everything that's beautiful about Islam and everything that's beautiful about Muslims. Amin would be the first person to see, that people would see as they attended the mosque. And he would welcome everybody with salam, which literally means peace. He would welcome people with peace. And with a smile, and the word salam, when we give somebody salam, that actually comes from the root word, from the same root word as Islam. So everything about his life, whether it was protecting other people, whether it was welcoming people, whether it was wishing peace on folks, is everything about Islam. Abu Aiz, who was, way more than the caretaker of the masjid, he was the first practicing Muslim family's house that I ever visited. Probably the first place that I ate hummus. And even though they were from Syria, even though they had a different culture, and even though there was, on the surface level, very little that we had in common with them, I was friends with his son, and they welcomed me into their house as if I was a part of the family. Brother Nadir, who lived across the street, his wife was my son's kindergarten teacher of Islamic studies. He came running across the street when he heard gunfire, right? So all three of these men were extremely brave. They were, and they represented something, the entirety, I think, of Islam, and something that all of us as Muslims and as non-Muslims should strive to embrace.
I'm so sorry for your loss. How are you drawing on the teachings of Islam right now for comfort and direction in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, having the ability to, pray 5 times a day in congregation with people in the community, I think has been one of the things that has helped myself personally and many others be able to process the pain and the hurt that's coming along. And to recognize that, even though these three are no longer with us, they actually laid out a standard by which we'll be living our lives by. How can we protect others? How can we keep our own communities safe? And an insistence that even though many of us may not look or dress like, the stereotype of an American, that we are equally deserving of our humanity and of our lives, and that we need to be unapologetic in our everyday actions. How can we give back to the communities that we're a part of, and how can we protect our loved ones on a daily basis?
Ramla, how about you? I mean, how do the teachings offer you comfort and also move you to action?
We all, I think, want to see the best in humanity. And that's what they represented, right? Selfless, thinking of others and the children before thinking about their own safety. But in the way that they showed up every single day to be in community and to serve. So I think that's what I'm taking away. And that's, I think, what we should all be taking away is like we're here on this earth. And, death is coming to every single one of us, whether it's today or tomorrow. And I think, the questions we have to ask ourselves is, when it comes, will we have lived serving others and supporting community and creating safety and belonging and care for others, or did we, waste it? And I think that's what I think about is even just these children who committed these horrific attacks, who committed such terror against the community. They were 17 and 18. And so I think what we should be learning about their sacrifice, their martyrdom, is that if we all served the way that these three men served, then maybe we could produce children who grew up with love and empathy and care for others. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they're seeing every single day.
Indeed, indeed. What can the community do to support healing right now?
Well, I think the most important thing is that when you hear people spewing hateful rhetoric against any group, organization, or religion, that you have to say something. I think we have, elected officials and leaders who are really guilty on both sides of the duopoly. You have, whether they're on the right spewing kind of outright hatred towards Muslims, or whether they're on the left remaining silent and refusing to kind of defend the Muslims who live in their community, but also overseas. You can't dehumanize Muslims in Gaza and not dehumanize Muslims in the United States. You can't sit there and bomb school children in Iran and not expect for people to take violence out on school children here. And so I think it's really necessary for everybody, both in public but also in private with their family members, that anytime they hear anything, that we have to question those things, and we have to begin to stand up for, yes, Muslims, but really anybody that is the victim of hateful rhetoric.
Ramla, I'll let you have the final word here.
San Diego, I think, is at a point where we have to take our safety and the safety of our children very, very seriously. And we can't take that safety and our children seriously if we're, if our elected leaders, if our leaders in very important institutions, civic institutions around the county are taking a stance that we need to be neutral somehow about this type of violence, right? That we just need to have, we need to go back to a society that actually shamed such acts, that made it, impossible for someone to grow up thinking that they can hate women and Muslims and, a litany of, have a litany of hatreds, and be normalized, right? And be supported. Like, I think the way we support people and the way we show love is to have accountability. And the accountability starts at the highest levels. It's at the mayor's office, and it's with every single civic institution in town. We don't need more spaces where more, we talk about civility. We talk about creating spaces for disagreements. But where's the line? Like, where do we draw, the line around stopping hate?
Very, very well said. I've been speaking with Khalid Alexander, president of Pillars of the Community and professor at San Diego City College, along with Ramla Saheed, executive director of PANA. Khalid, Ramla, thank you so very much for this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindmon. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
KPBS On Demand is supported by ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The work of the ACLU is about closing the gap between the America that was promised and the America that is. Learn more at www.aclu-sdic.org.